Good morning. This is Levi at Diesel Performance in Savannah, Missouri, and this pump is off of a New Holland 7840. It's a Delphi CAV pump. The model is a DPS, and I'm going to show you how we tear this thing down. So these things leak a lot of times, or they'll start missing, and I'll show you what the main problems are for that. But I went ahead and already loosened everything on this to make this quick. I don't have a ton of time for this video, and I want it to be nice and speedy for you. So the only thing I really haven't loosened is this clip here. So we're going to pull this, take this clip out, take a pair of pliers and pull this cap out, and you'll see what that looks like here in a sec. So there's going to be an O-ring on that. It's this black piece. And then there's a piece in here that will come out. It's like a piston. So one thing on these New Holland ones have a lot of return fittings. So I normally keep them there. And then I just pull one out, replace the O-ring down beneath it, or the seal, and then I put it right back in so I don't mix them up as I tear these things apart. Right here is a fuel screw. So there is a seal underneath it. So if you're going to try to replace that, I would keep that screw in the nut in the same position that you take it apart. So I'm going to pop this top cover, and when I do, I'm going to push in on this spring here, and that's going to just help release. You'll see on the inside there's a fuel latch. Alright, so right now our throttle lever is connected to our governor linkage there. You want to keep track of what hole that spring is in. So I call that hole 2, it's in the middle. And we moved this piece earlier, I pushed in on it. That moves that piece there, and that has to hook into this sliding piece, and this controls your fuel. So I'm going to just go ahead and disengage these, and then I can lift that cover off. So this is pretty simple, but you just take your nut off your lever here, take your spring, set it aside, your lever will pop up. You have a little dust shield here, and then your lever, you just push through this way. Same thing with your shutoff lever. I'm not going to show you that, but there are 2 black O-rings on those that you need to replace. They will leak. And so the reason why that cover was sticking is because of this dowel pin here. Fuel actually flows through it. That's why there's a little hole there. And there's 2 O-rings on that will need to be replaced as well. So we'll set that there. You have your top cover gasket here. And so we still need to get our spring off, and then we'll loosen these 4 bolts here. Lift that up, and make sure you pay attention to this spring here. See, that's a return spring for this, so make sure you have that engaged right when you go back together. But take those 4 bolts off, this whole thing will lift up here. I put my spring back on that to keep all that held in place. So what that fuel screw on this side does that we took out, that screw, is it pushes on the end of this plate and it limits your total fuel. So that's how that works. But I just took my tabs down on each of these. Now I'm ready to loosen those last three. This pump is a Delphi pump, so it is all going to be metric. These little ones are normally 7 millimeters, but sometimes they're 6 millimeter bolts. Alright, now we're ready to take this up. If you just lift up on your metering valve, you can kind of lift the whole thing. So your metering valve, it shuts off your fuel as it turns. And so you want to look for wear on that. It'll look maybe like a darker spot or a shiny spot. This one actually looks really good. Sometimes you can get the metering valves separate, but sometimes they're individual, or they're part of the head, and you can only get them with a head. So you want to look for wear on the end of this where it engages your governor sleeve. It can wear some grooves on that. But what the sliding piece in there does is it moves, it engages in these pieces here, and it adjusts them to adjust your fuel. So it will let your rollers travel farther and your plungers pump more fuel. This piece here is called your latch valve, and it adjusts transfer pump pressure at low speeds in advance. So when you take it apart, there's going to be an O-ring, a seal, another O-ring here, and then another O-ring underneath that. And that is a setting, so once again, we set that on the test stand every time. This bolt just holds your head in place. Whoops. This holds a piece in place on the inside. So we'll take that loose. This is just a plug. We use it to, we put a gauge in here, and that's how we set your transfer pump pressure when we take it apart. This is going to have an O-ring on the bottom of it to replace. And I'm going to set the phone down, and then I will take this plate off. That's your transfer pump cover. It will have, that's how you set the pressure inside the pump. The first thing when we run these on the test stand is set the transfer pump pressure, because it affects everything. It affects your fuel, it affects your advance, and it affects your return. So it's the most important thing to set. There are 4 bolts that hold it on there that I just loosened. And I dropped one of them, but that'll be alright. So There's a wear plate on the back here. Normally there's never an issue with it, but that'll need cleaned. So we've got our top spring, and then on the other side of it, it's not going to want to separate, but that's our transfer pump adjuster there. You can't hardly see it, but there's a nut or a screw inside there, and that's how we adjust your transfer pump pressure. You have a spring with this metal piece on top that goes underneath that. Here is your filter. You get a new one in the kit, so throw that away. Here's your regulating piston. We always replace it because it's constantly sliding up and down inside this sleeve. And then on here is a gasket, and it needs to be taken off and replaced as well. And at the very bottom, you've got this spring. So that's all that's in there. On the back side of that, there's going to be a seal right here. It comes off. Then I use a pair of needle nose pliers. We're going to pull our liner and blades out. And we always replace these. This pump has sat for a while, as you can tell. See if I can get it out without everything exploding. There we go. So there's a spring in between each of those blades. So there are those two, and the other two stuck in here. And they're what push it out and make fuel. What pressurizes fuel, you know. So normally it's gravity fed, or there might be a lift pump that brings about 7 psi to that transfer pump. Then that transfer pump bumps it up to about, somewhere around 80 pounds at full load. So these are your delivery valves, and I'm just going to take one off for now. There are different styles. Some are all one piece. This is a one that comes apart. So inside is a little top hat piece and a spring. So that goes in. And then your delivery valve is right here. And these are really bad about getting rusty, especially around the sides here. Well, the bottom of it. And so are these, so we always clean them really well. And then the inside of that as well. And the reason why is because they put these holes here. So if the seal goes bad inside, there's a seal in here too, it'll leak outside of that. Well, that also lets contaminants go inside and rust the inside of the head, you know, water or whatever. And so that's a really common problem with these. And these gaskets are sometimes really hard to get out. So that one actually came right out. So that's our seal. And it goes on the very bottom. Now we're ready to take apart the Advance. Already loosened everything. So there's a seal underneath this. So we'll take our cap loose. So you're going to have 2 springs, typically. And then there are some shims in there. And those are something we set on the test stand. On this other side, there's just going to be an O-ring. Then this is your head bolt. So there's going to be a rubber seal underneath that. This will lift up and flip it over. So you see this gasket here. I'll take that off and clean it. The inside of the Advance. So this piece goes like that. There's another spring here. And then our piston, there's a snap ring in there. So you can only get the piston out one way, and it's just kind of stuck right now. There's our piston. It goes that way. So, there's our advance. Let's see if I can... This thing was sticking. Alright, sorry for the little break there. I had to go answer the phone. But this is your head bolt. There's a hole there. It's kind of hard to see right in the middle. And that ball goes inside of that. And then there's 2 O-rings on the bolt right there. And then our advance screw is here. And normally I just take a crescent wrench. You want to take a good one, because if you round this, you're going to give yourself a nightmare. Take a crescent wrench, tighten it tight as you can, then give it a good push. And it normally comes right off. Sometimes they stick. So there's the advance apart. Now I'm going to flip the pump back over, and actually we're going to set it on its front, and then we're going to pop the head out vertically. So normally if you just twist it side to side, work it free, oops, it'll pop out of there. All right. So we got our head out in our rotor. If you'll notice, so in line here, our plungers are actually free on this, which surprised me. We're going to push these out. So those plungers got to go in to where that is on the inside. And then you have these shorter ones, and they've got to go back in the same holes. And inside here is your cam and scrolls, is what they're called. So notice how there's an arrow on that. These wear out on the inside. You can see right where my pinky is right there. There's some wear. And those are typically what will start causing a miss on these. I replace these just about every time. So, there we go. I had to use both fingers to get that up. The cam, or the cam ring will very often get chips in there. That one actually looks good. And then you have your lower scroll. I always keep them in order. Then, I normally come in through here. If you turn your drive shaft at the bottom, you'll have to turn it, and then you can take your rollers out. I use a magnet, which I have right here. So these will have different lengths. So you gotta, normally there's one that's different, so you gotta put that one in a certain spot. Normally there are 3 that are identical. See the shoe length, that one's shorter, this one's longer. So you gotta put them in the right spot when you go back together. But they are what rub on the scroll plates and the cam. And they're what wear them out. Last one. I lost one in the trash, but I'll go back and get it later. Now, we took off this bolt on the side here that holds in this aluminum piece. This aluminum piece here. This side your cam and scroll sit in. That side faces the front of the pump. Now I'm removing my key. On the front of the pump here, so that key goes in that slot. Use a pair of reverse snap ring pliers to get this snap ring off. Now let me use both hands. Snap ring off. This plate is actually a shim setting for the in play on the drive shaft. So as long as you put the right one back on, but you don't want to be interchanging them from pump to pump. Now our drive shaft will pop through. That was maybe a little too forceful. There's the rest of our drive shaft. Main thing you want to look at is where your drive shaft seal rides. Make sure there's not a big groove there where it could leak. Here's our thrust sleeve. So that is what the fulcrum lever here slides on. So you want to look for wear marks on the end of that. The drive seals go in a certain way, so we always put them back the way we take them apart. And this one has 2 drive seals, and so you'll notice they face the opposite directions. And then at this point, we can take our housing back off of our plate. And the only thing that should be left in here are our flyweights. Alright, let's see if they came out. So flyweights came out. You want to look for wear on the back side of these, or where the washer rides in the middle. This washer rides in between them all. You want to look for wear on that washer too. Those look really good, except they just need cleaned up. This normally is always kind of stuck in there. You just kind of got to magician it out, your weight cage. So I'll get it out later, but it sits, it's got splines that match up with the splines on your drive shaft. And that's what moves your flyweights. So the only thing that's left to show you is how we take this head and rotor apart. There's a special tool for it. So I would not do this if you don't have the special tool. It is right here. So that slot, flip this over, will go into there, and it'll loosen that. And those can be clockwise or counterclockwise. If it is left-hand thread, there will be an arrow pointing in that direction, so you know. But normally, if there's no arrow on it, if you turn to the left, you're going to be good. So that comes off. This is kind of gummy, so it's kind of tight. But your rotor will slide up. or your head will slide up, and then you're left with your rotor. So on your rotor, you want to look for hazing or signs of wear. It's normally around your ports, your charging ports, or your discharge ports. So you want to look for that. If you've got a hard start issue, it's probably your head rotor or your plungers that are worn out, and all you can do is replace them. So at this point, this thing's going to get cleaned up. It's going to get the new parts I said, but for the most part, this was a good pump to rebuild. So if you have any questions on this, there are a lot of New Holland pumps that are very similar to this 7840. We are a Delphi authorized fuel injection, so we can, get you the parts you need, the specs you need, whatever information you're looking for these things. So if you need us, we're at 816-324-6680. Thanks.